Vietnam's manufacturing sector value added is still very limited, just about 10%, 15%, okay, depending on the item.
How do you expect it to grow in 2011 and beyond?
I think that, the Vietnam's exports, this year, we have good, prospect.
Yeah.
Not because of the devaluation, though.
Not because of devaluation.
No,
so we're not actually competing with Thailand or whoever else.
See, most of Vietnam's exports are priced in US dollars from the beginning.
Yeah.
Then, changing the exchange rate,
Yeah.
That's not going to really change your export price.
Yeah.
So devaluation will not really give you that much advantage, price competitiveness in the international market. I don't think that, devaluation will have that much impact on exports. But
So what is going to help Vietnam in terms of exporting?
in terms of exporting, the short run...
You talked about value added.
Right.
Do you see Vietnam moving forward into value added?
Eventually. Eventually. See, right now, and this really brings me back to the story of this trade deficit.
Yeah.
See, so domestic value added, it's only 10%, 15%. Simply, then that means that if you want to export more, first you go to import raw materials, intermediary inputs.
Yeah.
So for Vietnam to, increase its export, actually, one period before, we end up seeing bigger trade deficit. And that's why, I just have to keep telling people that, hey, talking about Vietnam's economy, don't talk about trade deficit. Trade deficit is very misleading.
It simply means that a lot of activities are going on.
When we compare the foreign direct investment between 2009 and 2010, the 2009 foreign direct investment, good part of that went to the real estate market and, caused a little bit of bubbles, here and there. Compared to that, the composition of the foreign direct investment in 2010 has moved to manufacturing.
How much of that is moved towards manufacturing?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I really didn't remember the exact amount. But actually, there was a very significant. There was a significant shift. Really to the impact on the total size. The volume of Vietnam's imports. Now, is that a bad thing? Okay. Okay. In 2010. Because of that, you ended up seeing greater imports. But that means that you actually acquired the capacity to produce more, export more in the future.
And you expect that shift towards manufacturing to continue beyond 2010?
Yes. Well, actually, in 2010, we have also seen a very interesting increase in the approvals of foreign direct investment. Last year, the licenses given for some of the major investment.
Major projects in Vietnam. Are they in real estate as well? Or?
No. I'm talking about the steel mills or those really heavy industry investment is
heavy industry
been approved last year. Again, once let's say like steel mills, they start producing. They can potentially change the industrial structure or structure of the manufacturing sector. So I think what's happening in a way is encouraging, but of course now how soon, let's say those steel mills or the new heavy industries will start producing. Not that soon. So,
but then we've got a preparation period moving forward into a better future.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
And that's why I also say before people jump, you got to bend your knees. Okay, go a little deep, right? And then only with that you can really jump high. Got to be the face to bend your knees. So a bit roundish like cat. Okay, that's not a bad thing.
What about Vietnam in the overall perspective of emerging markets in Asia? Where do you see Vietnam in comparison to other emerging markets?
Last year, in particular, in year 2010, actually not only Vietnam, Indonesia or Philippines, they have done well, among the ASEAN countries. Actually, in the Singapore's recovery from the global economic crisis, was remarkable. Actually, what happened, in Singapore year before was also shocking. But then, so the Vietnam's recovery or steady economic growth in 2010, in a way it was great, but then it was not that exceptional.
How is Vietnam performing in terms of GDP growth rate in comparison to other EMA?
6.8% growth still is the highest among the ASEAN members. Okay, so that's.
So is inflation?
Inflation is the highest too. So that's why I say we can't just talk about the growth rate being the highest. Whether it's the best thing. It's good only to some extent.
So have you seen Vietnam having measures to curb inflation moving forward?
I should say authorities are of course making a lot of efforts. Now, some of the efforts are good. Now, some of the efforts are a bit worrisome. Now,
let's talk about that worrisome
thing that actually Vietnamese government, if it wants, is capable of controlling prices of so many things. Monitoring the prices have started. Now, many companies go to report to the government on the prices.
And what has the government done with the price monitoring data that they've got?
So far, they haven't really moved to the price control as such. But clearly showing what government is showing is the preparedness that if they have to move to control the prices, then they will do so to stop inflation. I think that's a signal they're sending out. If you really would like to see healthy development of market economy in Vietnam, actually pricing control, should not really be the most preferred means to control inflation.
What would you advise the government to do then?
Very conventional. Conventional means that, the tightening of the monetary policy, tightening of the fiscal policy, reduce the budget deficit. Okay, those in a way.
So do you mean that you actually see some risks in this area towards maintaining Vietnam's or developing Vietnam's macroeconomy in the future?
Yes, I do. Lack of transparency, lack of information data. Okay, so that's one major concern. And now, monetary data is the same thing that very often people ask. Hey, what is the exact amount of foreign exchange reserve? It's very important actually that the transparency really creates provides better comfort to the investors in particular. I think it's one very simple truth.
What else do you think is a risk for Vietnam in 2011?
This year will be a very difficult year to really balance the desire to grow and the need to control inflation.
So are you saying that Vietnam has a very, very strong desire to grow and not putting enough pressure on controlling what's happening at the moment?
I have to say so. And it's really a matter of courage.
Enough courage to slow down. So you're not talking about growing, you're talking about slowing down.
Right. Actually, obtaining growth is not that difficult. But then controlling, restraining, the limiting whatever the growth, potentials for this year, in order to really, put the cap on the inflation.
So if the government is not dealing with inflation right now, let's not talk about growing because it's going to create more problems for the country in the future.
Right. So this year, if Vietnam wants to achieve, let's say, 8% growth, it can. But then, if you are going to achieve 8% growth this year, chances are the inflation rate, will remain double digit. Okay, that's the price you have to pay for. Now, if you try to determine to bring down the inflation rate, let's say, to be in line with other Asian neighbors. Last year, for the other Asian countries, inflation rate we're talking about was just around 5 or below 5%. Now, if Vietnam can really align itself with its Asian neighbors, now that may mean that, even for this year, 2011, Vietnam may need to see slower growth than last year.
So you're talking about a year of building the foundation before you actually move forward.
Right.
That takes me back to the forecasted figures for Vietnam in 2011, though, in terms of GDP growth and inflation rate and other figures. Have you actually released any of those forecasted figures?
Not yet. Right now, the government, official forecast is to, grow at 7 to 7.5%, with the inflation rate, of 7%.
What would you like to say in terms of these figures for 2011 from your point of view? 5% inflation?
At least the target. Now, whether you can achieve it or not, but then I do hope Vietnam's growth rate, to remain at, let's say, 6%. I think it's very important because that's going to really, bring the confidence of the investors back.
Last question.
Oh, already
you should be happy
right.
about it.
Not necessarily.
So in summary,
yeah.
What do you think the prospects are for Vietnam's economy in 2011 if you're sending that message to potential investors out there internationally?
Let me start from a positive story.
Yeah.
If you look at, Vietnam, as the destination of investment, looking at the potentials for 5, 10, 15 years.
Long-term vision.
Right. Then this is a place to be.
What's the flip side of it?
Flip side of that, now, if you're really looking at just 1 year, year 2011, 2011 may not be the easiest year for Vietnam because it has to keep fighting, against inflation. It has to keep fighting against some negative perceptions.
Beyond 2011 is what you should look for.
Yeah, we expect, let's say, from this year to next year, there are going to also be major reform efforts of the state-owned enterprises. That's going to also give, very interesting, unique opportunities, as first year as a middle-income country.
So your message would be look to Vietnam as a long-term, medium to long-term market, and 2011 may be a rough year, but look beyond 2011.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Konishi, for being on the show with us today. Any last word to the audience?
Vietnam, has a lot of potentials, a lot of good people. So, please do come and see what's going to happen.
AGP has sent us a very clear message on Vietnam being a long to medium-term market. While 2011 can be a rough year for Vietnam to deal with immediate issues in terms of inflation, monetary policy, currency stability, and balance of payments, we should look beyond 2011 while Vietnam is still building its foundation during its first year of being a middle-income country. Let us thank Mr. Konishi for a great overview on Vietnam's macroeconomic outlook. If you have questions for this topic, please feel free to send them to fei@insidevietnam.com.vn. For past episodes and show updates, please visit Inside Vietnam on WordPress, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you very much for being here with us today, and I certainly look forward to welcoming you back in 2 weeks at 6:20 p.m. Vietnam time on VTV4. Until then, I hope the Year of the Cat will bring you lots of luck and sound investment decisions for Vietnam.